You're listening to Cinema IRL, the podcast that throws you into the movie and asks the question, what would you do? Here on our inaugural episode, Amber and Scott discuss The Beast and put themselves into this emotionless dystopian future. And now, Cinema IRL.
I wish I could switch places for just one day.
You find yourself in the unique position.
What would you do?
Put yourself in my shoes.
How do we handle this?
What would you do with it?
Put yourself in my place.
What would you do?
Oh, well, put yourself in my position. This doesn't sound too good.
What would you do?
How do you want to handle this?
What would you do? Put yourself in my shoes, would you?
What would you do? Put yourself in my position.
What would you do?
Just put yourself in their shoes.
Now it's your turn.
Okay, so we saw The Beast. If this ends up being our first podcast and the first noises that anyone hears out of you is you snoring, that'd be pretty appropriate, maybe.
Yeah, so I needed a good nap. So what we're talking about today is The Beast, and I'm just going to give a one-sentence synopsis here of the film. The year is 2044. Artificial intelligence controls all facets of a stoic society as humans routinely erase their feelings. So hopefully you did a great job on our intro, and folks know that we're not reviewing the movie.
Well, yeah, no, because if we were, I'd want to know how I could stoically get my time back. I think
I still do.
I think some people probably liked it. I don't know. It was a little scattershot for me, but that's not what we're here to talk about. So
No, we're here to talk about artificial intelligence and erasing your feelings and the concept of what the movie was about. Now,
well, it's interesting because they mentioned at one point about there being 67% unemployment or something like that because of AI.
Yeah, and that emotions get in the way of productivity and efficiency. So, that's kind of an interesting thing to talk about, because if you do take out, I had a bad day and I work on an assembly line, if you take my emotion of I'm mad at my fiance, or I, had someone cut me off in traffic, and you take that off, my work on the assembly line, if I'm my AI or I'm a machine, is going to be routinely consistent. Whereas if I drag all those emotions into the job with me.
Yeah. I mean, I can't disagree, certainly, with the concept that emotion is a great productivity killer in many industries. Obviously, not all. There are certainly, if we didn't have emotion, we wouldn't have things like music and movies and most anything arts.
Well, but in the movie, they did have music. And I was trying to listen to it as potentially being developed by AI, since AI can create music. And if you don't have the human behind it that's trying to either evoke an emotion or convey an emotion as they, their fingers go across the piano keys or strum across the guitar, is there emotion in it? And I listened to it trying to think this was created by a non-human, and it sounded the same to me.
I didn't like the music.
Well, no. What do you mean the music?
Well, the music that they were doing in the whole, like...
The classical music?
Well, most of the stuff that you're thinking was generated by AI.
No, I'm talking about the classical music when they were talking about how artists have no way to convey emotions anymore since AI does, the creative things.
Well...
Not the club music or anything else throughout the scenes.
I mean...
Which really interrupted my sleep, by the way.
I'm
not kidding.
I mean, it's interesting.
I did take a nap.
It's interesting because it's not just, hey, you should get rid of emotion. It's, hey, we have a procedure that you can lay here and close your eyes and get something jammed in your ear and poof, emotion be gone. Or, I mean, it didn't sound like it got rid of all emotion, but it sounded like it 99% muted it.
So let's think about that. So in the course of, the context of the movie, what we're discussing about is if it really happened in real life, cinema in real life here. If someone said you have issues today because of past life trauma, you're afraid of water because of a past life trauma. And if you could go to past lives to understand that trauma and then come back to your current life and be like, okay, well, I drowned in a past life. I understand why I'm afraid of water. So is it easier to cure that phobia?
I mean, I guess in some ways, yes.
And they did touch on this in the film for anyone who hasn't seen it.
I mean, it's interesting because I do think from a productivity standpoint, emotions are definitely not great, but I think from a life standpoint, they're required. And don't get me wrong, I mean, you can have lots of positive emotions and a lot of negative emotions, but I think if you take them both away, it leaves you kind of zombie-esque. And I actually know, I mean, I was on a med very briefly a number of years ago that kind of did a similar thing. It kind of made it so I didn't really feel happy, didn't really feel sad. I didn't really feel anything. And it was a few weeks, but I easily said no to this really quick because you need negative emotions to appreciate positive emotions.
Well, I guess if you think of it, if so on, is it Apple? Severed?
Oh, yeah.
Where
Or Severance.
Severance, yeah. Where they go to work and they're basically checking in and vacating their emotions, vacating that part of them, so they just go in their little worker bees, right? So I can think personally, I've had times where I've had to show up for work and I was up all night having a conversation with someone or dealing with something where I didn't get any sleep or I was all keyed up or I was upset. And I got to tell you, my productivity that day sucked. So, is there a divide then where if we look at an advanced civilization that for productivity, for work, it is AI generated and you don't have those emotions. And if you're an artistic type, you get to keep your emotions because you need that to fuel art and for people to feel your art.
Well, I mean, if I could basically have Adderall for emotions where before I start work, I take it and for 8 hours, I don't feel shit. And then after that, I could feel again. And so it'd be fine. Hey, you know what? That would actually probably be pretty good. I would not mind having some emotion removed from my work day. But I mean, if you actually make me make the choice between all or nothing, like I either get to keep all my emotions or I basically lose them all. I mean, part of it, because I think I am generally good at regulating my emotion in certain scenarios so that I don't feel like they're that horrible of a negative on me. Though, I mean, I'm human. Obviously, there are times where I lose my shit like anyone else. But yeah, it's just interesting. They referenced some event in 2025. We have no idea what it was, but it sounded like it was catastrophic. And like part of this was almost therapeutic. Like if you needed to get rid of emotions as a sort of
coping mechanism,
like a societal therapy, I could maybe see that. Like, I mean, obviously not on this scale, but if you were in and around 9/11 when it happened, you were actually there and you just had this like deep trauma.
Or a mass shooting.
Yeah, or anything like that that's just so incredibly traumatic. It might be worth it for those people to be like, yeah, you know what, I can't feel anymore. I'm losing it.
But the sad part about that is if someone signed up for this, I don't want to say time heals all wounds because I don't really believe that. But time does take the edge off, and time does provide insight, perspective, additional coping. So if you're robbed of that opportunity to come to grips with something, it's always going to be raw, right? Like if you deaden these emotions and then somehow, the pill wore off or the procedure, expired, and then all of a sudden you have these emotions, you've had emotions that are just as raw 20 years later as they would have been 20 minutes into the event.
Yeah. Time heals all wounds. It just leaves scars. And that's definitely something I found over time, in that you can do it. You're just going to have a scar. And let me tell you, over time, you're not wanting to re-injure that scar because that's way worse. So then you're always constantly trying to figure out, how do I do this? Otherwise, I'm tangenting like I normally would. But yeah, I mean, basically, if you go through too much emotional shit over your time, eventually you're nothing but scars. And you're like, I got nothing left here. There's nothing else for me to get wounded, or else it's not going to be good. I do find it interesting, and it sounds like it was something. Again, they didn't really go into details on this as to whether or not this was like a mandatory thing, but it seemed like it was something that
a lot of people did.
People were strongly gravitating towards. So whatever happened was pretty traumatic. It's interesting. I can't imagine we're ever going to actually live in a society where, I mean, honestly, in our lifetime, probably nothing like that's going to be truly available. I mean, I guess you have lobotomies and stuff like that now, but you're kind of wiping a lot more away than emotion.
Yeah. I mean, the brain's receptors can be reprogrammed, manipulated to a certain degree. So
Yeah.
I'm sure science will figure that out to, help people deal with trauma or perhaps PTSD or any sort of occurrence that they need to overcome or forget or cope or deal with.
Yeah, but in a more permanent and a more widespread scenario, I would think not. But
so what if you had to apply for a job and one of the conditions is you went through a scanner when you showed up at work, and it took out your emotions, it took out your bad night's sleep, it took out your argument with your sister, it took out the road rage incident you had commuting to work, and kind of like Severance, I guess, you went in there and you did your work and you had peak efficiency and peak productivity, and then you left, and then you got your emotions back and you went home and were your human self. Would you take that job?
They're paying me for this, or do I have to pay them?
You want to not have the emotions.
I mean, it's kind of like I said earlier.
It's a break, right?
If you could wipe away my emotions for the workday and just let me like actually do everything from a purely logical side, sign me up. Because again, as much as I say I'm good at regulating my emotions, I think I am, I still do plenty of things that I'm like, oh man, that was stupid. And the worst is when you're doing something stupid and you're doing something stupid, but you're still doing something stupid.
So I guess it really kind of boils down to is this procedure in the movie where, they take away your emotions. To me, it's almost like being prescribed a medication where, like, for example, and don't send me hate mail. I'm not a doctor. Don't think I'm a doctor or I'm giving medical advice. But the reality is sometimes doctors prescribe medication for illnesses, ailments that can be treated by yourself, like a change in diet, a change in exercise, a change in lifestyle, that you have the power. But so often, sometimes people or doctors or the medical institution or our wackadoodle American healthcare system will go the easy route, and I'm using air quotes here, and just pop the pill because the other stuff is too much work. So if you look at that as with comparing that to emotions, we all have the capability to regulate our emotions. And you indicated earlier that you're pretty good at that, and I would agree. But if as a society we put in the effort to regulate our emotions, to not have those crazy highs and scary lows that endanger society, if we did the work as a society, would we need these institutional erasing centers or to help us cope?
I mean, probably not. I mean, you know me and medication. I am generally, I don't want to say I'm pro medication, but I'm not anti either. Like, I think medication in many instances.
Sometimes it's the best choice, and sometimes it's just the easier choice. Like if you have some types of something that a change in diet will help, or more movement or less stress.
Yes, sometimes it's the easier choice, but on the flip side, sometimes life is really, really, really hard. And sometimes if you want to get through it, you need to make a few easy choices along the way so that you're not completely run down by the rest of it. That's just...
Well, and that also changes your emotion, right?
Yeah, of course.
Whether it's medication or pot or alcohol or, whatever your choice might be, it all changes those emotions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you have any final thoughts on...
Well, so I really glad I was able to catch up on my sleep in the first hour. It was a 2.5-hour film, although the concept seemed fascinating. I gotta say, I had a nap. So I'm rubbing the sleep out of my eyes as we do this episode.
We didn't leave the theater early primarily because of me, because I wanted to see where they were going with it. I thought that there'd be a good payoff at the end. Not really. No, not for me. I made some comments that people around me apparently looked horrified. And maybe I'm in the minority here on this. Like, I don't know. This is one of those films that I like to say was running a little low on the artsy and a little high on the fartsy.
I'm not usually the one to make that sound. That's usually you. Sorry to steal your bit.
Yeah, sorry. But I mean, again, it makes for a good topic of conversation afterwards.
Yeah,
especially with as relevant as AI is, and how we are somewhat going down this road. But yeah, so that's the beast.
We hope you enjoyed our episode. Thank you for listening. And to catch all the new episodes, please subscribe. We release 2 to 3 episodes weekly, so we'll have new content regularly. Until next time.